Hi, Amanda. Question for you. As you're well aware, back in July and then again at the end of October, the Ministry of Finance implemented new regulatory guidelines for mortgage lending in this country in order to help cool what they perceive to be an overheated Canadian marketplace. Just wanted to sort of get your thoughts on whether or not you felt that was prudent, an overreaction to the debacle down in the U.S., and whether or not you found it ironic that this current federal government was the one that took a heavy hand of regulatory initiatives to really get involved in the way banks and other mortgage institutions decide how to conduct their businesses and their lending practices.
Well, I mean, I think history will be the best guide to whether or not the changes in the mortgage rules were well-timed. I think it became clear the most recent one in August may have come after the market was already cooling. Policy changes are slow. It's not like I think the finance minister doesn't wake up one day and say, we're going to do this. I think it's kind of a phase-in period, and I think they might have missed their window. What I do know is that I have great sympathy for this government because on the one hand, they can't raise rates for a variety of reasons, not least that we're hardly out of the woods economically, and they don't need the Canadian dollar to go up any more than it is. And on the other hand, those low rates are encouraging us all to borrow, and they desperately want us to stop getting in over our heads, and we're not listening. And so I think the housing market may have borne the brunt of that. It sounds like you know the market well, so you would also be aware that CMHC, which is designed to provide insurance for individuals to sort of spread the collective risk and avoid what happened in the US, had become engaged in insuring pooled mortgages for big banks. And in fact, a major chunk of its portfolio was that business. And I think partly what the finance minister was trying to do is kind of focus their minds a little bit on what they're supposed to be doing and, back on the consumer end of things.
The government is responsible for all those CMHC liabilities if there's a problem, and the government also guarantees the competitors of CMHC, which is something I discovered when I was doing an article. So they have to make sure that they're not going to end up having to pay if the housing market goes bust. So I could see why they were tinkering more with the insured side of things.
But also then just recently with stuff that's come out on stuff that's not insured by either CMHC, Genworth, or Canada Guarantee, they just seem to have really taken the wind out of the sails, and you're seeing it with numbers that are coming out. Here in Toronto, condo sales down 30 to 40% in the last month.
Yeah, but does that not feel okay to you? I mean, from where I sit, unless you're selling
from my own personal point of view, no.
Right, fair enough, fair enough. No, and people who sell them, build them, sell appliances for them, I understand that's painful, but from the point of view of kind of the greater macro economy, we do want to achieve a soft landing, and I think that, with zero expertise in real estate, I would say to say that there was a bit of a bubble in condo values in Toronto is not a stretch. You sell condos, I can tell. Look at you.
I do financing for them.
Okay.
Come see me later. But I think there's also a point, though, the fact that we look at within the GTA that there are about 500,000 newcomers to Toronto every year, and that's where a lot of that money seems to be coming from offshore, yeah. U.S., China, Hong Kong, Dubai, which they laugh at us when they talk about our condo prices here in Toronto.
Yeah, we can debate it. I mean, the bottom line is we have a system that has insured mortgages, and therefore the government has the right and the responsibility to act as prudently as possible for other Canadians, and I think that's what I think their intentions were good. So whether they got it right or not, I think that's what they were aiming for.
We have time for two more, and then we'll let Amanda sign books at the back. So go ahead.
Hi. I wished I could have shouted out because I just lost my train of thought now. This may sound funny, but do you actually see a day where, do you feel there is a place in finance and big quote-unquote business for the emotional end of things? Because what I find is, what you talk about is great and inspiring, and then you can hear both sides of it, and I can see the point of both sides of it. But there's this, schizophrenia now on it. Like, on one hand, as a child, you're taught one thing, and then when you get out in the real world, it doesn't exist. It's like, the other day on the show, you did a segment where they talked about what happened in New York with Sandy, and how, at what point do the cab drivers and the gas stations, is that free market or is that gouging and taking advantage? And Kevin said, oh, no, that's free market, perfectly all right. They can charge whatever the market will bear. And then the next breath, something about unions, and he was saying unions are blood-sucking leeches, that we should get...
He's so subtle,
unions have legally negotiated, he might not like the terms of them, but they legally negotiated contracts for their members. But these guys taking advantage in a situation, it's like this thing of...
Well, so
it's almost like I see the U.S. is at a crux now where they have to decide whether a democratic country who promotes capitalism or they're capitalists who throws democracy out the window.
You're getting at something I'm quite passionate about, so I'm gonna say this whether it's your question or not.
I wasn't sure what the question was.
Which is, there's a tendency to be down on business and to think that sort of a profit motive is bad and that businesses are psychopaths. The thing that's beautiful about corporations is they're not emotional vehicles. They actually are geared to maximize profit, and as such, they're quite pristine engines. You don't need to worry about why they're doing what they're doing. They're very focused. They will allocate resources as efficiently as possible. They will head in that direction and only that direction, and I think that's fantastic. Where the people are concerned is we work inside the corporations, we buy things from the corporations, we regulate the corporations. We need to remember that those things are all separate. So the banks are a really good example. There's nothing wrong with a bank maximizing profit. It's what they're supposed to do. If they're not doing it, they're allocating resources badly. But if we're worried that maximizing profit is actually going to harm society, only people can regulate them back from that ledge. So to me, they're not, capitalism can and will live and thrive. Emotions can and will live and thrive. We need to just continue to be mindful that we're in charge. Corporations aren't bad, they're beautiful, they're wonderful, they make all the stuff that makes our life better, but we are in charge. We're the human sentient creature with our hand on the tiller, and we gotta, stay there.
How do we get back to that feeling of we're in charge?
We are, it's never changed, it's never changed.
Okay, next one, please.
Hi. All too often you hear about China being talked about as sort of an adversary to the U.S. or even to the Western powers in the global economy. But I read a book by Dambisa Moyo called Winner Take All.
Yeah.
And she was talking about how they've taken over resources in Africa and they've actually helped create infrastructure there, which was actually better than what like the IMF and the World Bank do when they go there and they give these loans which incredibly high interest rates and no one can pay back. And it's paternalistic in a way. And what China has done is actually mutually beneficial. And I was thinking about, you were talking about creating Canada's an economy based on innovators and entrepreneurship. But if we do have resources, and that is our strength, and we could export to China, how do you reconcile immediate economic growth with a long-term vision for what Canada should be?
I will say this about China, and I am not speaking for the CBC or as a senior business correspondent. I'm speaking now simply as a Canadian who's read about this.
Right.
China and India and some other nations have it as their stated intent to make strategic investments in resources. Now, a strategic investment is different than an investment for capital return. An investment for capital return is simply that you believe it's a good investment and one day you'll get your money out. A strategic investment implies that there's some other value to you. And so there's two problems with that. One is it changes the way you will allocate resources, which is so important. The bigger one, and this is where you start to sound like a bit of a conspiracy theorist, but let's just say that we hit peak oil one day. And let's just say we're running out of this stuff. Why does China want to own the oil? When they can buy it on the world market like everybody else at any time at the going rate, why does China and India, with massive populations, they can see the growth and their energy requirements down the road, what's in it for them to actually own the physical reserve? I get a little nervous.
Isn't majority of that conspiracy theory about rare earth metals that they control and play, like in
they have demonstrated that they will choke off a market, contrary to all good behavior by companies and countries, with rare earth metals.
That's
but they have not yet done with oil or potash would be another example. Things that we all need to share. Things that if they get rare, only a global market mechanism can actually allocate it efficiently.
Right.
I'm interested that they've stated in black and white that they have a strategic interest in these resources, and I would ask the question, Why would we allow that to happen? It doesn't mean they can't invest. Invest till the cows come home. Why do you need to be a majority owner so that if you wanted to turn the taps off or cart it all off to your country, you could?
Isn't part of it that they have...
We only have time for one more question. You've got somebody behind you, and then we'll wrap up. So go ahead, please.
Amanda, I find you very interesting. Can you cancel your 8:15? Please? I'll buy you a drink anywhere, sorry. Something about red. I'll make it quick, but
Is that your question?
you had me at hello. Thank you. But my question is, I have a 19 and a 21-year-old. The 21-year-old's in Wilfrid Laurier University. The 19-year-old is looking at U.S. colleges and university because he wants to go and play hockey, okay? And I realize it's a have-not in the U.S. It was very interesting, your comment. But now this innovation, what you're speaking about, and I'm wondering, you know, I'm standing back and I'm looking, what's my advice to them? And I'm going to ask you this because do they go under that normal undergrad, graduate, MBA, or, you know, that program that everyone's been kind of going on that? Do they, you know, do they look at that liberal arts? You know, like there's just so much, but just respond. And then we'll talk about a place to have a coffee later. Bought your book.
I get asked now, because I'm old, to give advice to young people. And you heard that I studied architecture. I tell the story in the book of why I'm not an architect and how I became a journalist. And the advice that I give to young people, and that would be what I would tell your kids, and certainly what I tell my own kids, do what makes you happy. And that's a luxury that when you're young, you can actually afford to have. If it's not making you happy, you're probably not that good at it. So stop doing it and do something else until it makes you happy. Now, if you're 50, that's not great advice, because you're in the middle of your career and it's probably too late to change, in which case I would say maximize your happiness. But if you're 20, for heaven's sakes, don't go to law school and then get a job at a law firm and find that you hate it and not leave. You need to leave. You only get the one life. So if it's making them happy, they're going to be good at it. Whatever that is, maybe they'll drive a garbage truck, maybe they'll be an artist, maybe they'll be a lawyer, who cares? They're going to be happy.
How old are your kids?
7 and 14.
Okay, we'll talk later, but...
We're not going out.
No, not about... You had to dump me in the crowd? I feel... But
Yes,
I will say this to you. I agree with you. However, I told my son, I said, you're going to be happy on the second marriage. No, I'm joking. But no kidding. But I said, no, but the reality of it is, how do you also live in Toronto, let's be honest with each other, and sustain a lifestyle that you're saying, you know, be happiness, but you need to make a certain income. So it's about just right now picking education, what routes you would say are, you know, this, you talked about Quest. Where's that in the university system? Go, Ellen, let her answer this one.
Just because I have this conversation with Kevin every day, if we change one thing about the way we all think about our world,
yeah,
it really isn't about the money. Come on. We don't need all the stuff we have, right?
I have to say, Amanda, that I really liked your book, and I thought it was so economical. It's just a couple of 100 pages, and you cram so much information in there, which is a mark of a skilled writer. So everybody, if you want a good read, have a look, and thank you so much tonight.
Thank you, Ellen. I really appreciate it.